VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you, Mr. Morris, and good to have you with us on Crosstalk today. Vic Eliason, your host. And our guest today is no stranger to Crosstalk, and I don't think he's a stranger to thousands of Americans that read WorldNet Daily. He's Joseph Farrah, editor, founder, chief of the WorldNet Daily News, one of the most powerful news services out there on conservative and truthful news. He actually, as we read about this, he joined Sarah Palin as one of the two nationally televised keynote speakers at the first National Tea Party Convention in Nashville in February, and is scheduled to make a repeat performance at the second National Tea Party in Las Vegas in October. The bestseller is 2003, Taking America Back. It prophesies the movement known as the Tea Party. And our guest today, Joe, has collaborated and worked together with more than a dozen books, including Rush Limbaugh's See, Told You So. His latest book is called The Tea Party Manifesto. And so we say, welcome, Joe Farrah. It's so good to have you with us today.
Vic, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Last time...
It's like being part of a radio institution.
Well, last time you were with us, you were feeling kind of low. Did you get any people calling you?
Oh, my goodness. I realized the power of your network. I have to tell you, because I was doing a lot of radio at that time, and some major, nationally syndicated shows. I heard from more of your listeners than all of the rest of them combined.
Oh, wow.
And they were all so encouraging. They just blessed me through a time where, I felt like you've gone through those times, too,
yes.
where you feel like the whole world is against you, and, you're all alone, you're tilting at windmills. And so I do appreciate hearing literally from hundreds and hundreds of your listeners. It's very unusual that people take the trouble to do that.
Well, across America, I think that indicates, though, that there is a growing awareness as Christians. When they hear the truth, they're not afraid to come forward and say, hey, I'm gonna take a stand.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we've seen happen in the United States over the last 2 years. It's a growing phenomenon. It's not going away. It's not a flash in the pan. And, like you said in the introduction there, this is exactly what I foresaw happening way back in 2003. I didn't know when it was going to kick in. I was hoping it would have been much sooner than than it was 5 years later. But nevertheless, I think what happens, Vic, is, it's sort of like every generation has to learn the lessons of the past.
Yeah.
You can teach history all you want. You can tell your kids socialism doesn't work. We saw it fail time and time again, and then lo and behold, the next generation comes along and they have to see it for themselves for some reason. That's exactly what happened when Obama swept into power and the liberal Democrats controlled both houses of Congress, and the reality of it shocked the American people. It shocked them to the core, and they revolted. We saw it happen, in the 1970s with Jimmy Carter. It resulted in Reagan, and Obama. There's no way this midterm election would have turned out the way it did if Obama wasn't president. So, to a certain extent, there's a silver lining beneath the dark cloud of Obamaism.
Well, the shellac had hardly dried when a new item of interest came forward, and that is what has been alleged to be the price tag for a trip across the seas, a 10-day trip to India by President Obama. And I know that there's been some denying from the White House about the $200 million tag, but they're not telling you anything about what it's really costing.
That's exactly right, which means the denial is meaningless.
Yeah.
When your own government won't even give you a ballpark idea. we don't need to hear, I understand there's security concerns for the president, so, these kinds of budgets they're shrouded in secrecy. We're not trying to get them to itemize every detail, but give us a ballpark. The Indians, and I think their estimate makes perfect sense when you look at the extravagance of this 10-day trip where you've got, 34 warships, 3,000 people moving, hundreds of helicopters. They're building tunnels in Mumbai so that, Obama won't have to walk on the streets. Air-conditioned tunnels. And, just, it's like moving the pyramids. How much does it cost to do that? Well, I don't know, but, $2 billion sounds like a reasonable figure to me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a point of concern again. We're talking about money that we don't have. The presses are rolling, and the inflation factor, our dollars are worth less by the day. And so Obama is spending $200 million a day of American taxpayers. What is the trip about, Joe?
Well, that's the greatest irony of all. Of course, the Obama White House has tried to portray this as, a job-making trip for Americans. He's going to go over there. He's going to sign all these big lucrative deals with multinational corporations, and somehow this is going to translate into jobs in America. Well, nothing could be further from the truth than that. Of all the places to go in the world to illustrate the problem we have of American job outsourcing, it would be India. All you have to do, Vic, is, you got some computer problems. You got an 800 number to call to get your computer problems fixed. Guess who you're talking to?
New Delhi. Yeah.
That's right. You're talking to somebody in India. Virtually the entire telecommuting industry is being outsourced to India, largely because the very high population of English-speaking people, technically savvy people, and that's where they get paid pennies on the dollar.
Joe, some months back, we have a vehicle here that has a dish on the top that we can access DirecTV, which has the news channels on it.
Right.
And so every once in a while the vehicle is parked, and so we have to have what we call, it has to be zapped, meaning that DirecTV has to send out a signal to the satellite that says, hey, wake up, receiver. Mm-hmm. And so we were out on the road, and I turned the thing on. Sure enough, it's going to have to be zapped. So I took my cell phone and I dialed this 800 number, and comes this person with a very beautiful accent. Mm-hmm. And so I asked them to zap it, and they zapped it, and everything came up instantly. But I said, you have such a beautiful foreign accent. I said, are you in a foreign country? Oh, yes, we are in India. Mm-hmm. And so I said, that's very interesting. I said, well, could I ask you a question? Yes. If I were to be there in India and I had a job equal to yours, I said, would I be receiving a salary, say $5 an hour or $3 an hour? And before I could say anything more, the lady began to laugh. She says, oh, no, not that much.
Wow.
It's pennies on the dollar. Exactly what you said.
Exactly. And, and keep in mind that the folks who are doing this are the very folks who, put the regulatory system in place in the U.S. that prohibits Americans from working for, less than minimum wage.
Sure.
It's crazy. It's like they got you coming and going. They put in environmental regulations that make it impossible to comply with. They put OSHA requirements on top of, this regulatory layer. And at the end of the day, what it means is Americans aren't working. The jobs are going elsewhere. And it's so sad. It's so tragic. And I don't know if they're ever coming back, Vic. The other irony of this trip, of course, is the idea that these big multinational corporations are jobs makers in the first place. They're not. If you look at the biggest corporation in the world, Microsoft. Mm-hmm. Total number of employees is somewhere around 80,000. And that sounds like a lot of people, right? But that's worldwide. Worldwide. if they were all in the United States, it's a drop in the bucket in terms of the employment numbers we need to generate here. And the jobs are, as you know, they're produced by small businesses. It's not the big businesses. It's the millions of little employers out there that are really the jobs-creating machines. And so the idea that we're going to help, facilitate these big deals for these big corporations, it's counterproductive, actually, at the end of the day. Why should they be getting all these special favors and special deals? Why should we find loopholes for them to do what they want to do? Really, we should be doing that, paving the way for small business.
Yeah.
Make it easier for them to operate.
Well, we think of the money that was spent. It appears that so Indian newspapers could carry the headline yesterday, Obama says U.S. in decline. Mm-hmm. Could you comment on that?
Well, the great communicator is really having problems communicating these days, it seems. He's
skilled on apologizing.
Yeah, but I mean, if you saw from the 60 Minutes interview to this guy who seemed so gifted, during the campaign as a speaker and so forth, I don't know, did you see the 60 Minutes interview, Vic?
No, I did not.
I mean, literally, there was a moment or two there where I actually felt sorry for Barack Obama because words were failing him. His speech became so halting. I was embarrassed for him that the President of the United States would be in a position like that where he didn't know what to say next. And then, of course, the big question of what happened in that election, and when he explained what went wrong, it was a failure to communicate. He blamed it on the teleprompter.
Oh, goodness.
And so, it's been a series of gaffes like that recently, and we're laughing about it. It's really not a laughing matter because we're dealing with somebody who's, occupying the most important position in our country, and he's not up to the job. And I think more and more Americans are recognizing that. I don't mean not up to the job because I disagree with every policy prescription that he has. I do. But I'm talking about not up to the job because he's not equipped.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the necessary experience and background and skills for this kind of a job. The man has never had a job in the private sector in his life. And he's going to tell us about creating jobs in America? It's just unbelievable.
I wonder if I could get your take on the new balance of power in Congress and what it might mean for us. Well,
there's two schools of thought. You have divided government. Some people think that's bad. You have one party government. A lot of people think that's bad. I tend to think that divided government is the preferable way to go. Because it makes it harder for Washington to do things, and so that's a good thing because Washington has exceeded its constitutional authority time and time again. So the more time they have arguing and debating, the better it is for us.
We'll be right back in 60 seconds. Our guest today, Joe Farrah, the founder and president of WorldNet Daily. We shall be right back.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how fast do stars change from one type of star into another?
Chris, evolutionists are fond of saying that changes in stars take millions of years to occur. But it's important to remember that they've never seen stars do anything for millions of years. And yet sometimes we do see stars undergo dramatic change quickly. Recently, a star was observed to change in only a few years from a white dwarf star about the size of the Earth to a giant star 80 times wider than the Sun, an increase in volume of over 500 million. Evolutionists used to insist that such changes took long periods, but when we see it happen rapidly. Evidently, the biblical doctrine of recent creation of all things is accurate. Back to Genesis, that's the view that fits the facts.
For more on Genesis, visit our website at icr.org. This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for going back to Genesis.
And welcome back to Crosstalk, where we're visiting today with Joe Farrah, Chief Executive and founder of the WorldNet Daily news source. And by the way, if you have never accessed WorldNet Daily, you're missing it. You're just worldnetdaily.com, and it's out there. It's got vital information, and I would urge you to take advantage of that opportunity. You know, Joe, as we were talking about the balance of power and what things may happen with the change in Congress, do you see the conservatives as being able to turn back the health care thing, or is it too late?
Well, I was encouraged when I heard John Boehner promise to do that. And you know, if you run the numbers, it's not an easy assignment. If the Republicans controlled both houses of Congress, it still would be a difficult assignment because they'd have to override a veto. I don't know what Boehner's strategy is. I know there's several ways that we could free ourselves of this Obamacare program. One would be in the courts. There are a number of challenges being made by various states, and the question is if that ever reaches the Supreme Court, you know, where is that going to go with the new balance of power there too? And then the other thing is obviously if Congress voted to overturn, they'd have to be concerned about a veto. I don't know how that happens in the next 2 years, but, you know, a lot of the provisions of Obamacare don't even kick in until 2014, which means we have a fair amount of time before the most heinous parts of Obamacare take effect. I'm very, very confident, Vic, that we're going to see somebody else in the White House after 2012. Very, very confident. In fact, I'm increasingly confident that Barack Obama's political situation is so precarious that he may not even seek reelection.
Well, you know, as we saw the candidates fleeing his presence, it was a telling issue. Interesting, of course, of watching with Nancy Pelosi. Moderate Democrats, if there is such a thing, have written a letter telling Nancy Pelosi that they don't want her as minority leadership. Could you comment on that?
Well, think of during the campaigning, during this midterm election, we're not even talking about moderate Democrats. Some of the most socialistic and progressive, whatever you want to call them, Democrats who were seeking reelection in the House had to, felt they had to campaign as if they were somehow anti-Pelosi to get reelected. I'm thinking about like DeFazio in Oregon. Literally, his campaign commercials were portraying him at odds with leadership when in fact he was part of leadership, and that we saw that throughout the whole country, where not just the so-called moderate Democrats, but even the leftist Democrats were trying to portray themselves differently, and it obviously had some impact because a lot of them did get reelected by small margins. And listen, if I were a Democrat, I would not want Nancy Pelosi to be my leader anymore. But I'm not a Democrat. I'm an American. I'm not even a Republican. I just believe in this country. And I think probably the best thing for us is if the Democrats make Pelosi their leader again. I'd like to see Harry Reid being the leader in the Senate and Pelosi in the House and Obama in the White House. And the next election will make this one look like a warm-up act.
When we think about the collateral damage that occurs sometimes in these last minutes, for instance, here in the state of Wisconsin, our Governor Doyle, just in the moments of time before the election occurred, and of course Governor-elect Walker was selected, he signed a bunch of contracts for an $813 million high-speed rail thing here, which they're trying to get reversed now. And the question is whether these are contracts that were let to people, and now the threat of lawsuits if they renege on the contracts. But a lot of this last minute, it's kind of like the U-505 submarine. When it was captured from the Germans, they opened up the valves and tried to scuttle it. And so sometimes I feel like our state is being scuttled here in Wisconsin with some of these drastic financial things that can sink the ship.
Well, we might see a lot of that in the next couple of months in the lame duck session of this Congress. What are they going to do as they're leaving power, and so many of them no longer have any accountability whatsoever? You know, they're out of office in January. What are they going to do to this country in the next 2 months? It's a very dangerous time for us.
I want to talk for a moment. I want you to address this issue of George Soros. His funded think tank is claiming that progressives won the election and says that Obama needs to rule by executive order. They're basically calling for the overthrow of our Constitution.
Right.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you know, as far I don't really care about his perception of things about progressives winning the election. That's a fantasy. But I'm very concerned about his suggesting and proposing and pushing Obama to use executive order power. Executive order power, if you actually understand what it's supposed to be, has nothing to do with legislating from the White House. I mean, we have a division of powers and separation of powers in this country. There's only one legislative branch of government, and that's the Congress of the United States. That's very, very clear. Soros, really what he's advocating is dictatorship. He should rule like a dictator, and he should, with the stroke of a pen, basically impose his, ideas about what laws should be. The rest of us should follow. That is, by any definition, tyranny. No accountability whatsoever. And what the new Congress needs to do is really to put its foot down and restrict, in no uncertain terms, executive powers to what they're supposed to be. Congress. A lot of folks don't understand this. You know, we don't have three equal branches of government, according to the Constitution. We actually have three unequal branches, and Congress is the one that has most of the power. And one of our problems has been that, Congress hasn't exerted the powers that it has. It has really overwhelming powers to, for instance, Congress has the ability to restrict what the Supreme Court even can rule on. I would like to see Congress reassert that authority in the future.
Joe, yesterday you carried a story, says Obama introduced as fellow Kenyan. This thing has been haunting this particular administration. It hasn't gone away, and I know that WorldNet Daily has carried much of the vital information regarding this. Some of it downright shocking. I know that the president said he didn't want to go around with his birth certificate stuck to his forehead, but what has happened here? This issue is stuck somewhere because it's still here.
Yeah, it's never going to go away, and I think even Obama is beginning to think about it. It's the source of jokes on the late night shows all the time, regularly. My personal pledge about a year ago was that I wanted to keep this issue in the forefront here in this country, and I started a billboard program, and we've had dozens and dozens of billboards all over the United States that ask, where's the birth certificate? It gives people a chuckle, and it keeps that, when we started that campaign, Vic, the polls showed that only 50% of Americans were even aware of the controversy. Today, 58% of Americans are very doubtful and skeptical that Obama is constitutionally eligible. That's according to the most recent CNN poll. Now he can't even escape it when he leaves the country. There are people raising this issue and making him obviously uncomfortable because, listen, in Kenya, people think that Obama was born in Kenya. They're quite sure that he was born in Kenya. Now, I don't know whether he was born in Kenya or not. I don't think any of us know where he was born. He doesn't seem to know what hospital he was born in Hawaii. He's not able to produce a birth certificate with any detail that's verifiable and credible. So, that's why the doubts are there. And I believe it will be an important factor, increasingly important in 2012. And I think it may be the thing that pushes him over the edge to not running. And I'll tell you why. I know there are efforts in several states, Georgia, Arizona, possibly Missouri. In the coming legislative session, there are going to be efforts to pass laws that will require any future presidential candidate, beginning in 2012, to establish and prove constitutional eligibility before they get on the ballot.
Amen.
Now, think about what that will mean in 2012. Let's say there's one state that has approved such a measure. That means Obama is either going to have to prove his eligibility in that state or not appear on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty convinced at this point he can't prove it. And that will mean that, he will have to admit to the entire country that he never was able to prove it, or the alternative is not seeking reelection.
Well, I'm looking at that article. It says, it seems no matter where the president goes, he continues to be called a fellow Kenyan for some strange reason by Kenyan officials. And the odd moment there as he was being welcomed, Mr. President, to India as a fellow Kenyan. I'm very proud to see that you have made, and then the president cuts in and says, made something of myself, and laughs. Boy, he had to cut in and edit right fast there.
It's really true. And of course you have the media covering for him because in that ABC report, the reporter said, of course, Obama wasn't born in Kenya and so forth, which, asserting that as fact, I certainly wouldn't assert it as fact that he was born in Kenya, but the fact of the matter is we don't know where he was born. Sadly, after 2 years in office, we still don't know whether our president is indeed constitutionally eligible.
And when you look at ABC News or others, like even George Stephanopoulos, who had a quick cover for the president's comment about his Muslim faith,
right.
which it's there. Well, folks, we're visiting today with Joe Farrah, the chief executive, the founder of WorldNet Daily, and we're going to take a break in a moment here, but I'm going to open our phone lines because across America, this is a source for news that will give you the cutting edge. If you've never been there, you need to be there, worldnetdaily.com. Is that right, Joe? Am I saying that right?
You're saying it right, but I'll give you a shortcut to get there, and
okay.
It's WND.
WND.com.
Yeah, a lot easier to remember for people, and frankly, we're moving more and more in the direction of just referring to it as WND. I know you've been around from the beginning, 14 years ago when we started, but that is the trend, WND.
Our phone number across the nation, 800-733-9829. The lines are open. If you'd like to talk with Mr. Farrah, Joe Farrah, the chief executive and founder of WorldNet Daily, the lines are open. They're already starting to flash, so hurry. And if you find them busy, don't hesitate. Every time we go to a new caller, hit your speed dialer there and get in with us, okay? 800-733-9829. Stay with us. This is Crosstalk.
How can I hope to be an effective parent today when attacks on the family are stronger than ever before? According to author William Farley, the answer is the gospel. Parents who claim the gospel as their own have an enormous effect on their marriage, their integrity, and their love for their children. In the book, Gospel-Powered Parenting, William Farley writes that keeping the gospel at the forefront of every aspect of marriage helps parents fear God, sensitizes them to sin, motivates them to enter their children's world, and causes them to preach the beauty of the gospel to their children through their marriage. He presents a parenting approach that is motivated by the gospel, including that of loving children, proper discipline of children, and bringing them up in the ways of God. To receive a copy of the book, Gospel-Powered Parenting, send a donation of $16 or more to VCY America, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. To donate by phone, call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
And welcome back to Crosstalk. And as the lines are jammed, literally, we'll take your calls. And the call is toll-free from anywhere, internationally as well. Simply put in the country code and dial this number, and it's toll-free. And so we're going to be taking your calls. Joe Farrah, the founder and editor of WorldNet Daily. Now, keep your questions brief and to the point. We'd like to cover as many calls as we can. First of all, we're going to go out of our country to Canada and talking with Francis. And Francis, you're on the air with Joe Farrah.
Good afternoon, Vic and Joe. Thank you for taking my call. Joseph, a couple of questions I want to ask you. I'll ask them, then I'll get right off the air so others can get in. Joseph, I'd like to know your reaction to the report today on Drudge about a missile launch off of the West Coast. According to Drudge, the Pentagon doesn't know. I don't know what disturbs me more, the missile launch or the fact the Pentagon don't know.
Right.
And I'm thinking EMP. And the other thing is, I want to ask you, Joe, could you give Christians some advice on how to react to things like the tyrannical things that are coming down the line, this radiation scans at airports,
Good question.
And the manual pat-downs and vaccinations and the New World Order kind of thing. I think we have to speak out against evil as Christians, but how should we ultimately respond to that as Christians? Thank you, and I'll take your answer offline.
Francis from Canada, thank you.
Well, I'll do my best. First, on the missile launch, it's a mystery to me. I'm just like any one of you, trying to figure it out on the sketchy reports that we have at this point. But we're hearing, of course, that it's an intercontinental ballistic missile, which is even stranger, which because it seems to have been a launch from the United States, not at the United States. And how we don't know about an intercontinental ballistic missile launch from the States is truly a puzzle. As to the other question about what's happening at our airports, it really is very, very disturbing. The reports over the last few days, in particular, as the TSA has stepped up its security procedures, which, frankly, I don't even think are security procedures anymore. I think they're really harassment procedures of people traveling. The very disturbing indications that children and women are getting groped and molested. I mean, really, what we're talking about here is like state-sponsored sexual assault in some cases. And your choice is you go through these invasive scanners where not only are images, naked images of your person displayed to people there, but those images are actually stored for God knows what purpose. And so people who opt out of that have to opt into physically abusive kinds of procedures. And it's, how do we respond to that? I'll tell you something. I was going to travel next week across the country. I canceled my plans. And a big part of that was I don't want to have to deal with that personally right now. I don't want to have to make that decision. I don't respond very well when people grope my body, and I don't like the idea of walking through those scanners either. So I've put the issue off. I know I'm going to have to get on an airplane sooner or later again, but it really is bad news. And what we need to do is protest it loudly and publicly and hopefully get the attention of our lawmakers who will realize they're going to pay a price for this.
That's right. Joanne in the state of Michigan. Joanne, you're on the air.
Yes, I was wondering I want to ask Mr. Ferris about George Soros. Isn't there something that can be done about him? He seems like he's a traitorous. I mean, he's trying to help these people destroy our country.
Well, he might be a traitor if he were an American, but I don't think that George Soros really sees himself as an American. So, I'm not sure he can fit the definition in the truest sense of the word. But yes, this is a man who has very, very un-American ideas, and he has he has, of course, the pocketbook to support those ideas,
Yes.
probably more than anybody else you can think of offhand, and he's willing to do it. And when you think about the organizations out there that are doing things that run counter to the best interests of the United States, so often you find that they have George Soros's fingerprints on them. George Soros is bankrolling them. And, what can be done about it? Number one, what we try to do is we try to expose it to the American people so that they can make intelligent decisions and recognize the kinds of propaganda that he is putting out there. I guess he wants to pretend that this last election was a victory for his ideology. I can't imagine a bigger repudiation of his ideology than what we saw, except maybe in California.
Joanne, thank you so much for the call. We're going to go to the state of Indiana. And Angela, you're on the air with Joe Farrah. Hello, Angela.
Yes.
You're on the air with Joe Farrah. Go ahead.
Okay. What I'm calling about is in regards to our president. I don't understand why it is that there is so much rhetoric and controversy over this president's accomplishments or failures in the past 2 years that he's been president. It seems like there is just an extra special effort to demean this president for some reason. Is it because of his culture, his nationality as an African American? I mean, what about the accomplishments that this president has done?
I couldn't disagree with you more. In fact, I believe because of all of those factors that you have mentioned, his culture, his African Americanism, and those things, that to a great extent he has gotten a free ride. And that's very, very sad, because that in itself is evidence of racism. But the people in the media, for instance, who, hailed him as the anointed one, the Messiah, and so forth, and have refused to reflect on all of the, problems he's created for himself in the last 2 years, what are we talking about here? The American people repudiated Obama in the last election, but it wasn't because the elite out there have been pointing out the problems at all. So who is it that is zeroing in on Barack Obama for reasons other than substantive reasons based on his ideology?
Good response, sir. We're going to go to Darren in Wisconsin. Darren, you're on the air.
Yes, I have 2 points to make. I heard on the election day, Dick Morris on Fox News say that Russ Feingold is going to challenge Obama in 2012. It was interesting. Mr. Feingold on in his concession speech said, "It's on to the next battle. It's on to 2012." Hillary is also going to perhaps get into the fray, and also Dennis Kucinich. And this, again, is according to Dick Morris. And according to Fox News, also, the president has 7 weeks to make a decision, according to major party donors, on whether he's going to run for re-election.
7 weeks. I think that might be cutting it a little close. I'm not sure he's got 7 weeks. But look, no matter what happens, if Obama seeks re-election, I'm certain there will be Democratic opposition that he faces. If you think back to previous presidents who have had very high unpopularity ratings, Jimmy Carter comes to mind. You generally see opposition from within their own party. But as I said earlier in the program, I'm not at all sure that he is going to seek re-election. In fact, I would, if I had to bet on it today, I'm not a betting man, but if I had to bet on it today, I would say he's not going to seek re-election. And so, sure, you're going to see Hillary out there. She probably sees it as her last chance, and I don't think Russ Feingold's going to be a factor one way or the other, but you will see opposition, no question about it.
Stacy in Florida. Stacy, how are you?
Good, thank you.
You're on the air with Joe Farrah.
Okay. I remember the last time that you were on the show, you said that you made a conscious decision to go with the birth certificate thing knowing that it was going to cost you, which obviously it has, because I remember seeing you on different Fox News shows.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm wondering is that has any of these people, like off camera, not that they'll say it publicly, but privately to you, have they expressed their doubts about President Obama's eligibility as far as being president?
Oh, yeah, absolutely they do. And in fact, even the ones who don't, if I can spend 2 minutes with them, they will concede that I at least have a point. And but see, that's not what's reflected on the air. And you're absolutely right. In fact, it's been 20 months since I have been on any major cable TV news show. And I used to be a regular, at least once a month, often 2 or 3 times a month. It's not that they don't invite me anymore either, which is even more peculiar. I've been in studio, done tapings, and about this very subject, and nothing has ever aired, which is even more peculiar because I attribute it to the fact that they think that they can get me in there and make this idea look ridiculous, and it doesn't turn out the way they planned, and so therefore nothing ever airs. But when we say there's a controlled media out there, we truly mean it is controlled, and it's not just the issue of eligibility. But I will say that on that issue, I have never in my lifetime, and I'm 56 years old, I've been involved in the media my entire adult life, I've never seen an issue where there was as much disinformation and overt propaganda to diminish the idea that there's anything there serious to look at.
Millions of dollars spent. Thank you very much, Stacy from Florida. We are going to be taking a break here momentarily. Before we hit the break, give us some points of contact where people can get more information on the web there, Joe.
Well, I love people to just come and visit WorldNet Daily because I believe that you'll see something that's very different than any other news source available anywhere, whether it's the Internet or anywhere else. And, so I encourage people to go to WND.com and just check it out. If you don't see stories every single day that you find compelling that you're not seeing anywhere else, then no reason to come back. But there is a lot more to WorldNet Daily. We do have a weekly magazine, a monthly magazine, and we publish lots of important books. But I think the best way to tippy-toe in is just to visit the website for free, sign up for the daily news alerts, and sample it. And if it doesn't meet your needs, you need go no further.
We'll be right back with Joe Farrah in our final segment here. Stay with us. The telephone number 800-733-9829. This is Crosstalk.
Ideas have consequences. Your worldview matters. And Germany found that out firsthand. Starting in 1878, Julius Wellhausen, a theological professor and author of numerous books, began to proclaim that the Bible was a book of stories, but not the divinely inspired Word of God. He taught that the Bible could not be trusted, but human reason could be trusted. This philosophy became known as higher criticism, and this liberal philosophy jumped the ocean, began to become popular on the East Coast, and then spread throughout America. So how did this false teaching impact Germany? Well, what it did was it caused the German people to quit trusting the Word of God and began to listen to man, to buy into situational ethics. The end justifies the means. And Julius Wellhausen's false teaching laid the foundation for the German churches to become weak and to accept the change and the inspirational speeches of a man named Hitler. When the American people reject the Word of God, we are opening ourselves up to a tyrannical leader just like Germany did.
This is a busy day here on Crosstalk. Our guest, Joe Farrah, the founder and president, the CEO of WorldNet Daily. And we have all of our lines continuing to be jammed to the walls. We've got calls from all over the United States. And right now, we're going to go to Phil in Milwaukee. And Phil, your comments, please.
Hi, I was wondering, with everything that's going on, do we still need to be worried about what Obama's efforts were doing with the Electoral College thing?
We should always be concerned about the Electoral College. It's not just Obama who wants to do away with the Electoral College, which I think the founders showed, incredible insight and vision in giving us yet another kind of check and balance on the system, so that the popular vote wouldn't dictate who becomes the president of the United States, but that every state has a say. And it's not just Obama. I'm not even sure where Obama stands on that issue, but there are a number of forces. There's an overall trend among the progressives. They want to democratize the United States of America. Mm-hmm. They want to move us more in the direction of democracy, which on the surface doesn't sound so bad to people until you realize how distasteful democracy was to our founders for good reason, because democracy tends to descend into a kind of a mob rule where the majority dictates and takes away the rights of minorities. That's not the system we have in this country. Thank God for that. And the Electoral College is just one of the small pieces that keeps us free.
We're going to go to David in Pennsylvania. David, you're on the air with Joe Farrah.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. Mr. Farrah, thank you very much for WorldNet Daily. It's awesome. And a quick comment and a question. The comment, I just found myself a little disappointed after the election because I wanted the Senate too. And then the question is about George Soros and his influence in the political world right now. Thanks. I'm going to hang up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, Soros is very powerful, and he's very powerful for one reason only, not because he's got good ideas or even very appealing ideas, but he's got lots of money, and he's very adept at putting that money where he feels it needs to go to influence even more than the political system. Yes, he bankrolls candidates and he bankrolls initiatives at various states and so forth, but more importantly, his influence is in the culture. It's shaping the culture. That's where we're most vulnerable, I believe. We're not going to keep America free just by continuing to vote for the lesser of two evils or even the better of the candidates, because the powerful cultural institutions like the education system we have in this country and academia and Hollywood and the media are so influential. Not necessarily, you might not see it in one election or another, but you see it over the long haul, the way our values are shaped. Take one issue, for example, this issue of same-sex marriage. Yes, it's been repudiated 31 times, and every state that's had a referendum on this subject has been repudiated, but by increasingly smaller majorities. That's the influence of the culture at work there. We become desensitized to the most basic moral issues of our time. I mean, 10 years ago, if you suggested that we might have same-sex marriage in this country, you'd have been laughed at by 99 out of 100 people. It was a preposterous idea. Nobody would have put such an idea forward. And today, it's increasingly accepted. That's the influence of people like Soros and the influence of our culture on the most basic values that we hold.
We've come to the end of our question time, and our apologies to Alabama, Wisconsin, and those others waiting. But Joe, I'd like to take the final part of the program here. And you have a website. In fact, let's call it the email. If people can respond There are thousands of people, because I know our lines jam and people are trying to get through. And so if people would like to respond to you, what is the email address?
Yes, absolutely. I appreciated that so much, the encouragement that I got last time I was on your program with you. And I do love to hear from people. I hear from them by the thousands every day, and email is the most efficient way for me to deal with that volume. It's very simple. It's J. My first name is Joseph. It's J. Last name Farrah, F as in Frank, A-R-A-H, at WN as in Nancy, D as in dog.com.
jfarrah at WND.com.
That's right.
And folks, WND.com, get your computer fired up there and get a copy. Some of you might say you don't have a computer, but I believe even in the public library system, they have computers that are there, and even a librarian could assist you in gaining information such as comes to you through WorldNet Daily. Well, Joe, I want to tell you how much we appreciate the frankness, the courage, even though people want to bend, you don't bend. You come with the truth, whatever it costs.
Well, I appreciate that, Vic, and one of my inspirations in this life has been through the work that you do, and so those words mean a lot coming from you. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate the work you do.
Well, Joe, again, our prayers are with you, because very few programs, news sources, they deal with the political, the social, and all the economical, but I know that the spiritual dimension is also something that's dear to your heart.
Oh, absolutely. And I think of what we do at WND. I think of our news service really as a Christian news service, not in the sense that it's only of interest to Christians, not by any stretch of the imagination, but we attempt to bring a Christian worldview to the reporting of the news, and that's what distinguishes it more than any other factor from the competition.
Folks, I'm going to invite you to send Joe an email and let him know what you feel in your heart about this kind of vital news that must get out, and more where you're seeing the media controlled. We pray that we'll continue to have the liberty to speak out. Joe, I'll be in touch with you on the other issues we talked about through the email.
Thank you so much, Vic. God bless.
God bless you too, brother. Bye-bye now. And folks, thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a cassette or CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.